I thank you everybody for coming. We're honored to have Wade here. He has worked in higher education for more than 20 years at UC Berkeley, the University of South Florida, and other institutions. He's coached students applying to medical schools and other competitive graduate programs and led workshops on interview preparation, test preparation, and personal statement development. He's collaborated with disability support services in a variety of roles, giving firsthand experience helping students navigate the accommodations process and ensuring colleges meet their responsibilities under the Americans Disabilities Act. He's also someone that lives with FSHD, so he's passionate about helping students with disabilities successfully transition to college, advocate for the accommodations they need, and build the skills to thrive both academically and personally. So thank you so much, Wade, for being here with us. This is a subject, as you well know, is near and dear to my heart. I reached out to you earlier because my son is sort of going through this and we're exploring it. And there's a lot of things to navigate and things that are very helpful to know before you start this process. So thank you so much for being with us tonight and sharing your expertise with us.
Of course, thank you, Ali. I'm so happy to be here. And like Ali said, I have FSHD, third generation. My dad had it, a couple of uncles, grandfather. So yeah, FSHD has been kind of an ever-present part of my life. And with having to medically retire a couple of years ago, I want to focus on volunteering and trying to be of service as much as I can. A couple things about the presentation. Just like a college student, I finished it maybe a half hour ago and surprised Sapna with it. Sapna is here. She has expertise, went to Michigan State University, but has her PhD in higher education and higher ed administration. So she's going to help out too. But since I just did surprise her with getting all the slides, we probably will bounce back and forth and just answer questions as we can. So I do have quite a detailed PowerPoint, but I made it pretty text intensive with a lot of information just so it can be a standalone resource later on so that people can refer back to it. So it may be hard to read from certain devices on the screen, but we're going to drop it in the chat and provide other resources. And later this week, I'll send out a Google Drive kind of database that has lots of different links and support to be found. And then lastly, I just am more than happy to meet with families individually to talk about any aspect of college, whether it be applications or looking at accessibility or anything that might be of help. Like I have been an admissions reader at a couple of competitive colleges, in addition to all of the work I've done across different aspects of student affairs. So I've seen kind of multiple sides. And then lastly, with Supna, we actually met working at UC Berkeley a long time ago. She was a student staff member while I was a resident director in the dorms there. And we've stayed in touch. She went on to get her PhD in higher ed, and now she is still helping out with things. And so happy to have her. Do you want to say hi, Supna?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Sapna Naik, and I'm happy to be here. And I'll be moderating the chat. So if you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and then we can make sure to get to them as well. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, feel free to pop questions in the chat at any point. Like if we get sidetracked and end up not doing the whole presentation, that's totally fine because we have the document to refer back to. So let me go ahead and pull this up. Um, okay. So just to start out, the theme that we're really hoping to cover is college is possible. That no matter what the physical challenges or accessibility challenges might be, it is within reach and something that is achievable. Um, so we're just going to mostly focus on the accessibility side of higher education and finding colleges. There's other great resources out there about the general kind of college application process and financial aid, and we can certainly help with that part. but the focus today is really around FSHD and specific kind of needs, accommodations, navigating from high school to college, and just starting to do as much advocacy work and self-advocacy work as possible right now. So again, it's about helping students find a college where they can learn, participate, grow, and thrive. Again, we're focusing much more on the accessibility side and preparing. And I'm happy to offer any sort of family support with any aspect of college prep, and meet individually with families on Zoom at any time. Um, so we also, as I referenced, this presentation just came together a little bit ago. And so it's our first time doing this, and your feedback is welcome. We definitely want to keep working on trying to make this as helpful as possible for folks. I already introduced ourselves. Again, Sapna works at a public university in Texas, focusing in student success as a staff member. And going to try to kind of move through these quickly so there's plenty of room for questions. So really the idea that we're trying to get at is reframing the question of, can my child go to college, as opposed to what kind of college experience will allow my child to become the most successful, healthiest, and happiest version of themselves. So there's a huge range of helpfulness kind of from college to college in terms of around accessibility. Though the ADA governs all campuses, the level of commitment and the ability to accommodate and willingness to accommodate can change. And we're going to talk about some of the things to look out for, some of the positive signs, the green flags, and really kind of come up with the questions to ask as you're looking at colleges or once you're in college. And we really want to emphasize that some of the discussion today will focus kind of on the traditional four-year, traditional live-in college experience, but there are many, many, many ways to approach college and no one right way to do it. And so community college is certainly a great option financially, as well as just being kind of a transition point. Some students want to live at home and take classes. Also, academically, community college can be a great way to knock out a lot of the prerequisite classes for general education requirements at a four-year college. There are also some great community colleges that offer two-year degrees that lead to really solid jobs. Many students choose to live at home while attending college. There are a lot of great online and hybrid college programs that are available. And one other thing to think about in terms of just managing fatigue, the transition and everything else is kind of creating a flexible timeline, that it doesn't have to be the traditional like full college semester. There's ways to spread things out and take care of ourselves. Let's see. So one thing I think is important to address is there's been a lot of shifts in higher education over the last 30 or 40 years. Like approximately 20% of current college students identify as having a disability, though an estimated 5 to 8% of those students have a primary physical disability. And again, estimates look at only 1 to 2% of college students have mobility impairments. So that kind of leaves us in a position where a lot of the disability support offices are largely focused and spend a lot of their time working with mental health conditions, ADHD, learning disabilities, and autism spectrum disorders. And then there's, of course, folks who many of those apply, including a primary physical disability and other challenges as well. Lastly, at some schools, as many as 30% of students might be receiving accommodations, which has drawn some public discussion about this. Other students as low as 2 to 5% receiving ADA accommodations. So this is partly just to normalize the discussion and talk about disability in higher ed. And I'm going to pause there and just see if there's any questions thus far. If not, I can jump right back in. All right, let me pull this right back up. All right, so early planning. One thing that is just so important that we want to get across is that planning and preparing and building self advocacy skills, developing the ability to manage healthcare as a college student, including scheduling appointments, conducting their own doctor's appointments, is just so important. And these skills can be developed and worked on over the course of years leading up to college, whether it be right after high school or later on. And it's also exceptionally important to understand accommodations, how that works. Later, we're going to go over in pretty great detail the different kinds of accommodations across all aspects of college life that can come in handy. We'll drop it in the chat, but the MDA offers a great college planning worksheet that really outlines kind of a year by year leading up to college, just different things and checklists that students can work on to both develop the self-advocacy skills as well as be in line for the traditional college admissions benchmarks of taking tests if needed, the PSAT, the SAT if needed, writing college essays, giving letters of rec, like, and on and on and on. And it does a great job of merging the disability self-advocacy piece with kind of the standard college admissions process. Next, looking at finding the right colleges. And the questions that we encourage to think about are beyond just looking at rankings or prestige or anything like that. What's most important is around accessibility and feeling a sense of belonging, and asking questions. Can my student learn here? Can my student live here comfortably? Can my student fully participate in campus life? Can my student stay healthy here? Can my student build meaningful relationships? And will this prepare the student for the career that they are going for? And I'll just add one caveat of that, and something I can echo later of just, it is very, very, very common for students to change majors, to switch up career plans, and that is all part of the process, and sometimes part of the goal of college is exploring different topics and being flexible. So academic fit is pretty kind of straightforward, looking at potentially majors that you might be interested in. Class sizes are particularly important for those of us with FSHD in terms of not just navigating classrooms, but also the ability to interact with faculty. We'll talk more later about the importance, particularly as having disabilities, of connecting with faculty, making use of office hours. Also looking at on campuses, like what academic support services are available. And that's something that has a lot of expertise in, which we can talk about and answer questions if there are. Looking at writing centers and other academic coaching and study skills workshops. Some important things, again, particularly for those of us with FSHD to look at as evaluating campuses, is of course the physical environment, and that includes the size of campus, hills, being able to get around, weather. I've made it my life goal to avoid snow and ice for the last several decades, and building accessibility. Practical considerations of just thinking about travel to and from home. How much of a physical toll does that take? Safety of campus, social involvement activities, recreation. Many colleges have kind of adaptive sports programs where folks with varying disabilities can participate in team sports and even compete against other colleges. And then again, just kind of what many of us may already know, a beautiful campus doesn't necessarily mean it's accessible. And so it's important to think about what it would look like throughout the course of a school year, going through many seasons, and not just like when you're there on the tour. Uh, Healthcare questions, particularly important for us, looking at the campus, like looking at what is offered on campus. A lot of bigger schools have great health centers on campus that include counseling as well as primary care and may have even some specialists. Looking at, okay, if there are community appointments to get to, is it accessible to get there? Is there transport? Is there help? Looking at what sort of school insurance and kind of the health insurance, what it will cover, will it still be applicable back home? So it's good to kind of really research all of these early on. Um, and so every college has some form of a disability support office or DSO, which is what we'll be using kind of as the acronym throughout. And so they go by a variety of names: disability services, accessibility service, student accessibility office. At Berkeley, it was disabled students program. So it's just something along those lines. But a simple Google search of disability and blank college will get you to the right place. Or accommodations and blank college will get you to the right place. So the role of DSOs is pretty similar across colleges. Primary point of contact for students with disabilities. They're the ones who students will do the voluntary disclosure to about disability to start the interactive process, which is the language under the ADA. That's where documentation typically will be submitted. The DSO will look at the request and determine what is reasonable. Although honestly, reasonable is quite subjective with a lot of accommodations, both with students and professionally. And so sometimes there will be some back and forth. Determining which accommodations are approved and reasonable, and then communicating those typically is the role to professors and other campus departments, is typically the role of the DSO, though it may vary from college to college. Um, and then I think this is the last slide in this section of looking at campus visits as a real world accessibility test. So one of the best ways to really get a sense of the college and responsiveness is to request accommodations for the tour and for the visit. That will kind of tell you like how quickly is it handled, how quickly are concerns addressed, just whether or not those accommodations are ready once you get there. Seeing the communication between offices. Then, of course, it's important to tour the spaces of looking at accessible residence hall rooms, classrooms, buildings, and then looking at the infrastructure around campus, looking at event spaces, noticing like where most of the student events are held. Are they accessible? One other key that something that I remember from like just working in Res Life and putting on events and programs, like look for accessibility statements on event posters, and is there contact info for who to contact if you need accessibility at an event you want to go to. Those are all kind of helpful things to keep in mind on a visit. Welcome questions from anyone at this point.
I have a question about the DSO office. So they determine which accommodations are necessary. How do they, what starting point did they use? Can you bring like your 504 or your IEP from high school and that's kind of a jump off point? Because obviously they probably don't know much about FSHD.
Correct. And so that is kind of the focus of the whole next section of looking at the mechanics of and you're exactly right. I mean, I still have yet to go to a primary care doctor who's ever heard of FSHD. So
Right.
certainly like campus officials and the accommodations office likely won't. So the language and what is used is starting with a list of functional limitations of how that functional limitation becomes a barrier for access to academics or other parts of campus, and then generating different kinds of accommodations. And I have some examples in the next side.
Okay.
But for example, like the functional limitation for me is a hand muscle fatigue and low dexterity. So then potential accommodations would include like voice detect software, being able to record lectures, getting help with note taking. Like those all mitigate like the role of my hand issues. So those are potential accommodations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you would bring in like these are a list of my limitations, and then they would kind of match up what accommodations would go
Correct.
with those limitations.
Correct. So you generally create the list of functional limitations with healthcare professionals, but honestly, a lot of healthcare professionals will be happiest if you bring in that for them and do all the work, and then they sign. Like I mean, I probably shouldn't say this aloud on while it's being recorded, but I've yet to go to a doctor who doesn't want me to write everything out for them to put a signature on.
Right.
So that's where like preparing and planning ahead and that's why we're going to focus too in the next section on generating like common accommodations across like res halls, across different aspects around transportation. Like some campuses may have golf carts. So again, like functional limitation is the starting point, and then like get at the generating ideas for accommodations.
Maggie has a question. Does having accommodations from College Board for AP tests make the DSO more likely to approve accommodations in college?
That is, I would definitely take that paperwork in when you have the meeting with the DSO, because there's a pretty high threshold oftentimes to get those accommodations. But typically colleges are going to want their own documentation and paperwork that is from sometimes multiple providers is helpful. But you can bring along your IEP or 504 or stuff from College Test Board as like kind of supporting materials, because that's all going to help potentially save some time. And some schools may just kind of trust that and go with it. Other schools may be much more um, selective about what kind of documentation they want, or really kind of belaboring things. So it really depends from college to college, but it certainly helps if you've already received accommodations from a pretty scrutinizing place, like for the College Test Board, et cetera, et cetera.
And Sarah,
Thank you.
you're gonna go over some examples of accommodations in your next section. Is that what you're gonna do?
In great detail.
Right. Okay. I know from my experience, like when Sam started going to community college, we connected with the disability office, and like before when he registered for classes, he would have to call them and say, I'm going to be in this classroom, this class, and then they would make sure that he had a roll under desk and things like
Mhm.
that. Now,
Oh
they
yeah.
weren't always in the best area. Like sometimes they were shoved in a corner or whatever, but that's just something you have to that's where self-advocacy comes in. Something you have to work out with the professor. Like, I don't want to be shoved in the corner, or I can get in the door, but my accessible desk is over in that corner and I can't get to that
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I know that was kind of our initial
Yeah.
introduction
And
to the office. And we didn't
that
even know the office existed, honestly. We kind of stumbled onto it and then we're like, oh, we probably should go talk to them.
Yeah. I mean, that's no, certainly there's a lot of challenges that can come up, and that is part of, like you said, the self-advocacy of, okay, if the accommodation is not being met fully or not in a way that is inclusive, like if you're being othered by being put in a corner, like you're in a timeout, like that's not like
Right.
including somebody in the educational process. So like there's ways to kind of follow up. And so, I mean, I guess we can. Are there questions kind of on the last section? If not, like we can dive into the accommodations and then handle all the accommodation questions at that time. Does that seem okay? Sapna, did you see questions from the last section, or are they mostly accommodation related at this point?
I think the accommodation related, and Ali read the questions.
Okay, okay, cool. No, thank you. So let me pull this back up. Um,
So now if you want to read the questions, I can, I'm just kind of used to doing it, but I can
Oh
back
yeah,
up and
don't.
let you do it.
Either way is fine.
I'll let you do it.
Okay,
okay,
thank you.
okay. So and for the sake of time, we're going to kind of speed through a couple of these. So, just the framework wise, there's some big differences from high school to college. Like, it's important to note that In high school, the onus is on the school, the teachers, to identify the need for services. Where in college, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the student is the one who chooses to disclose disability and then starts the accommodations process. In high school, again, the parent often is the primary advocate. In college, it's the student often leads to the primary role. If I'm a student and Supna is a staff member somewhere, and my parents were to call Supna without me there and ask questions about, oh, how are his grades? How's this are going? She can't say anything about, and in some cases may not even acknowledge my being a student, because unless there is a waiver signed, all communication is directly with the student. So there is a FERPA waiver to bypass that, but it just kind of shows how big of a difference it is. And so accommodations are insured by, in college, we'll get into that kind of with the DSO communicating. And then again, 504 applies to both high school and college, but the IDEA Act, and then in high school, and then the ADA in college. So again, college is a transition towards greater independence, not independence all at once. So it's still very, very important to have the role of family members and include in decisions to whatever degree the student is comfortable. And so just a bit about accommodations. So it is a lifelong skill because the ADA is what applies to professional employment as well. And so the skills that are built in college around communication, about advocating for yourself with accommodations, about making sure accommodations are met and met in a positive way, like this will move into the rest of a student's life with employment, graduate school. If somebody wanted to go to, say, a graduate health program, whether it be PT or this or that, or med school, like the same process would be in place for getting accommodations in those graduate programs. So this is an investment in kind of lifelong success, is working with accommodations. Um, and did I miss this slide? Okay, yes. And just a real quick kind of personal note of accommodations. It's something I've benefited from greatly. It's allowed me to stay working in certain areas of higher ed longer than I might have been able to otherwise, particularly in residence life. I had great experiences at Berkeley with really being supported, being offered accommodations that kept me going. And a key takeaway is that accommodations aren't giving someone an edge over their peers. It's kind of trying to remove structural barriers so that can participate and fully thrive. And again, the little caveat here, lower expectation. Yeah, accommodations do not lower expectations or reduce standards. And so what accommodations do, remove barriers so that the expectations can be met on equal footing. Maybe a better metaphor could have been used. Accommodations created the conditions for meaningful, sustained professional contribution across multiple roles and institutions. And I've also had the not so positive experience with accommodations not being met. So it really, in my last job, it became a huge barrier and challenges. So, but not to get bogged down in that. So the medical documentation, even though it's not really presented until later to the campus, working on communicating with healthcare providers, and it can be primary care, neurologists, physical therapists, licensed medical professionals, occupational therapists. That is a good conversation to start having. Also, brainstorming, just kind of writing up and jotting your own notes about functional limitations, to really come up with a list that healthcare providers can, if not sign off on, help kind of create or further. So in order to get accommodations, it takes disclosing to the Disability Support Office. So the student initiates that process. The responsibility is on the student. Then there is what's called the interactive discussion of the interactive process, which is a conversation with the DSO about functional limitations, educational barriers, and then paperwork is submitted, accommodation determination, accommodation letter. Typically, the DSO is going to communicate with campus departments. Implementation will go into effect, and because so many accommodations across so many different aspects of campus are needed, there is certainly not a guarantee that everything is always going to go smoothly. And that, again, is kind of where we get back to self-advocacy, ongoing review, adjustment. But that's the general framework. So again, thinking about functional limits rather than the diagnosis, because as we all know, even across a family group of people with FSHD, and I can look at my family, of the actual functional limitations were exceptionally different from one person to the next. So it's not the diagnosis, it is what is looking at what the challenges are. I gave the fatigue example before, or limited hand strength. So fatigue in this example would be like traveling between classes. If somebody is still able to walk, like then we can look at things like transportation help, accessible transportation, golf carts on some campuses. Priority registration might be a part of that to be able to group classes really close to each other. Another example of functional limitation, not being able to raise your arm very high or have strong grasping strength, and then you're going to be taking a organic chemistry lab. So, okay, what is the executional barrier? Needing to sometimes lift a flask or other devices in the lab above the shoulder, and then the possible accommodation would be up to kind of communicating with, sometimes it may be worth pulling in the chemistry department. And I was actually just last week talking to a friend who's an organic chemistry professor at Hopkins about just what he would do in those situations. So oftentimes it does take a lot of input to really figure out how to make those things work. So housing accommodations, I just wanted to kind of go through, hopefully that covers the process. If not, we can touch on it in a minute. But so going to go through the different aspects of kind of college life and looking at some of the accommodations and things to consider. So housing offices, typically the accommodation request for housing does not go through the DSO. It'll go through the housing department, but not always. But the DSO will communicate to you how that works. So Zubna and I both worked in residence life at Berkeley and have a lot of experience kind of around that side. So one thing to think about is whether a single room, what is sometimes called in higher ed or in residence life, like a medical single, though I wish it were probably called something else, whether a single room is going to be most helpful, and then the process for looking at reasons for that. But there's several different kinds of residence hall styles on campus. There's a traditional residence hall that you kind of see in TV and movies, and like where it's this one hallway, double rooms or triple rooms down the hall, all use a shared bathroom. Those tend to be the most social, but also like just in terms of distance to bathrooms and the communal living can present a lot of hazards in terms of accessibility. Suite style is like a smaller group of residents with a common space. It may be 4 to 6 residents, and there even fewer. Apartment style is kind of what it's described as, like a small apartment for 2 or 3, oftentimes with a kitchen, limited meal plan. And again, like I referenced the medical single, it is important to factor in that like the roommate experience can be exceptionally positive. I mean, it becomes a little bit more challenging depending on accommodations and things, but it's not something that I would never automatically say like, well, get a single, because even if like it's going to be automatically approved because of medical reasons. And then other things to think about in terms of residence halls, like where they are on campus physically, of how close they are to the classes, dining halls, study spaces. Within the residence hall, first floor may be ideal. If not, making sure there is consistent elevator maintenance and that those are working. Thinking about bathroom accessibility. And it's really like important too to think about just being in the residence hall where there aren't physical barriers to hanging out with other residents, because so many friendships and connections are made in the residence halls that if there's a physical barrier to get to the common room where everyone else is hanging out, then that is going to be exceptionally challenging. Bathrooms, there are more and more colleges that have roll-in showers, grab bars, accessible fixtures. Um, Many colleges have what they call ADA accessible dorm rooms, but just because it is technically ADA certified or can meet the code doesn't mean it's going to work for any one of us with like, and that's again where functional limitations come into play. Some of the accommodations can include changing the door handle type, um, keyless entry, looking at different kinds of furniture and sleeping setup, like bed height can be lowered, getting a better mattress than um, the standard twin. Was it the extra long twin that they use in most dorms? Getting something with more um, helpful for ergonomics and not exacerbating muscle pain, muscle fatigue, and things like that. Making sure that in certain rooms that everything is accessible from wheelchair or shoulder level, not having to reach, having sometimes looking at furniture storage to get just the clutter out of the way. Like the place I'm currently living is just like moved everything out of the way, like of just trying to have as much open space to navigate. Looking at some campuses may offer emergency alerts or something to be able to get help if something were to come up. One thing that I find really important is like looking at just temperature regulation within um, the residence halls or in the dorms. Like some of these older residence hall buildings are notorious for just not having great HVAC systems. So really thinking through that. A whole other kind of conversation if there's a need for personal care attendants. That could be kind of its own workshop or presentation. So that is something to consider, and I can provide resources for and kind of talk that through offline if that applies. That is just kind of an introduction to some of the ideas for residence halls. That is not at all the limit of what could be provided as accommodations. Um, Academic accommodations. So this is an area of really thinking about like for students with FSHD, managing fatigue, pain, and endurance across like the full day or the full week can become a very, very important issue. So that's where priority registration just means that at most colleges, that means it's first day registration for classes. So that makes a huge difference because typically at most colleges, unless you're an athlete, you get the registration like the lowest as a first year student. So that means you wait for everyone else up to sign up for classes and you get the last picks, which could mean 8 a.m. classes or 9 or 8 p.m. classes or times that are not at all accessible. You'll get classes that are nowhere near each other. So having that priority registration, you can find the classes that are close to each other to figure out your schedule as will work best for you. You can also make sure there's enough travel time. So colleges are required to relocate classrooms if it's not accessible. Some of the logistics around that may vary. Um, One thing that is particularly important is thinking about ergonomics and breaks of um, making sure, kind of as Ali referenced, like having the right kind of desk. A lot of the bigger schools that have like your Chem 101 or Intro to Econ are going to be in lecture halls with 200, 300 seats. They're going to be those old wooden seats oftentimes that would just, yeah, I can't imagine what it would do to my body sitting in that for an hour and a half or whatever the case may be. So really looking at accommodations around ergonomic seating, around just having easily navigable classroom space. Again, like if there's science lab equipment and modifications needed there. Exams are particularly important. Thinking about having breaks during exams as needed, extended testing time, the right kind of seating, being in a quiet environment, just things that can help focus on maintaining energy, not having unnecessary fatigue. Again, another area is looking at technology and materials, voice to text software, screen readers, alternate format textbooks. So, I mean, college textbooks, again, can weigh so much. They're huge. A backpack and carrying it around campus is just not a viable option. So, having textbook in PDF format, getting permission to record lectures, getting note taking assistance. And so, yeah, that is there. Then communicating with professors. So this is particularly important. So even if the DSO is contacting professors, like, it's just so helpful if the professors get to know you. So reaching out early before the start of the classes, helping them get to know you as a person rather than just somebody who is another email they get about accommodations. Attend office hours is super important to build rapport, to get to know professors. And once they get to know you or understand kind of the situation, like, will be so much more helpful and willing typically, rather than just emailing alone. And uh, one other thing, professor office hours or professor offices I'm familiar with are not usually accessible without some communication early on. But I think there may be more office hours held in classroom buildings now. So that hopefully would remove some of those barriers. Um, okay, we can skip that for now. And that. Okay, so that covers like two big areas of academic accommodations and um, residence hall accommodations. We'll still get to the transportation, but I wanted to pause for questions there. Subna, did you see any other questions? Okay.
Not yet in the chat.
Okay. Do you have anything to add, Sapna, that may have missed or glossed over? Okay. Um, okay. Okay. So transportation. Um, So again, like I referenced, like some smaller campuses may have golf carts that are available with accommodations. Campus shuttle systems are fixed routes, but many of them will be have lifts or ramps as needed. Um, and so evening transportation is something to look into. So accommodations are really based around what again the functional limitation is, like if somebody's still walking but is not able to go far enough, or like the distance between classes, and looking at, okay, is a golf cart appropriate, are there other things, because I mean a shuttle from one side of the campus to the other is not very helpful if trying to navigate just a couple buildings over. One key question is just thinking about during bad weather, whether it be rain, snow, heat, or otherwise, what are the options. This is part of the discussion to have with the DSO. Um, Accessibility shuttles late at night, the reliability of those, and then also like the average wait time for the buses, shuttle services, etc. Um, Dining halls are quite challenging in many cases. Subna and I were talking about the one of the Berkeley dining halls that was just like always packed. But still, that was where the students and the a lot of the students living in wheelchairs were eating, and like there was still enough seating and kind of navigating some of those barriers. Um, But these are all things to think about of just touring, all the more reason to tour the dining halls, not just to eat the food and see how it is. But some accommodations to consider are prepackaged to go meals for high fatigue days, or in bad weather, can meals be brought or made available for delivery? Um, Flexible dining access, extended hours, or alternative meal locations to reduce crowding and physical strain. Of course, dietary accommodations are pretty standard on campuses and can be met by the dining halls. Um, but it's really important to think through, just like at the end of a day after classes, of getting to the dining hall may just be a whole nother amount of muscle exertion that just may not be doable at that time. And so what are the food options, and what how to reduce the barriers and that impact? um, Campus involvement in student life. So ADA goes just all across the spectrum of campus life. So that includes students should be able to fully participate in student organizations, leadership opportunities, applying to be a resident assistant, attending sporting events, concerts, etc. Trying to figure out accessible seating, making sure that folks don't have to stand in long lines or have any sort of exertion, exacerbation. Again, we talked about residence hall life, um, and accessible bathrooms wherever you may be on campus, um, student organization meeting spaces. So those are things to keep in mind. Um, Sapna, did you want to? Were you still willing to cover like the
Yeah, sure.
bill? Yeah, this is much your expertise.
So I think one of the things to keep in mind is that students and families don't have to do all of this alone, and there are a lot of resources available on campuses. So, as Wade was talking about earlier, finding out what a lot of the resources are ahead of time can be helpful to whenever deciding where to go, or what programs to choose. But then also once you get there, then identifying all of the resources and how they can be useful. So in terms of um, resources, academic resources, of course, the Disability Support Office and providing academic accommodations. But other resources include academic advising. So this would be the individual who's meeting with your student to pick classes, to figure out which academic path to take. As Wade mentioned, faculty office hours. Another way to think of those are student hours. So that's really is supposed to be an opportunity for students to interact with faculty members about course content, about accommodations, or about maybe even career prospects or research opportunities and things like that. There's a lot of academic support programs that are also available on most campuses, including a tutoring center, writing center, to help with uh, academic coursework, specific content specific help. And one of the things that came from the pandemic was the availability of more online resources. So before that, a lot of the campuses, including mine, did not have a lot of online resources available. But that has been something that's grown and stayed around. And so, for example, tutoring might be an in-person opportunity where students can go in and meet with a tutor in person. Those have limited hours. There's also online tutoring with tutors that are available on campus. And then some institutions also partner with external vendors. For example, there's a lot of different vendors that are available now. So they might be partnering with them, and that can provide 24/7 tutoring that's available to students. So a student can technically log on at 2 a.m. to be able to try to get a tutor and not have to leave their room to be able to do that. Similar opportunities for writing support as well. Another service that a lot of institutions are growing is called academic coaching or student success coaching. This is one-on-one help with a professional or a peer to help with things like developing study skills, identifying executive function, ways to improve their executive function, time management, um, test taking skills. So a lot of different skills that are not necessarily content specific, but can help across lots of different across their courses and across their time at the institution, regardless of whatever classes they're taking. That can also be a really good opportunity for your student to be able to interact directly with one person and to get to know them better, in addition to their academic advisor. There's also study skills workshops that those are also offered often in person, and then some of those are also offered online. And then there's also asynchronous types of opportunities where a student can log on and watch videos to be able to improve their study skills. A lot of institutions are also utilizing modules that students can do on their own on through their learning management system. So examples of that include Canvas, um, D2L, Blackboard. So those are often the learning management systems that students have to use for their courses. So there's a lot of resources that are available through those as well. In terms of a career and research, there are often career services or career centers that can connect students to different types of on-campus work, internship opportunities, as well as resume building, cover letter, interview skills, and things that can help them prepare for life after college. Colleges also often have undergraduate research programs, which connect students to research opportunities that they can work directly with the professor, gain skills. Sometimes there are stipends associated with those types of opportunities as well. So then that can be a good way to get a little bit of extra money to cover costs. Um, in terms of health and wellness, so in addition to the student health center that most colleges have, there's also counseling services that are available, or psychological support services that, again, have moved, some of which have moved online. And there's also often the colleges are partnering with external vendors. So one that our institution partners with is called Timely Care, which allows students to be able to access through an app mental health support and 24/7 on a 24/7 basis, and then also just tools and skill building in terms of mental health. And finally, another big section is related to community, sense of belonging. Um, a lot of institutions are building their peer mentoring programs. So there are a lot of different types of peer mentors. An example of that might be that an incoming student is paired with a peer mentor automatically during their first semester, or they were required to take a study skills or an introductory course to college, and they might be paired with a peer mentor. Students can also seek out additional opportunities to connect with peer mentors that are specifically in their major. This is a really great opportunity for students to get to know one another, to hear directly from students rather than only having to talk to professional staff members. And that's also, a lot of these things can also be good student work opportunities that are part-time, that are often flexible, that may in part be online. Peer mentoring is also one of those things that is moving online as well. So there are in-person as well as online opportunities and more group opportunities. Wade's talked about student organizations and campus recreation as opportunities as well. So those are things to check out ahead of time, and then to try to get involved with once on the campus to see what student organizations are out there, what does the campus recreation center, what types of uh, fun things are available so that we're not just doing school all the time. So if you have questions about any of those, please feel free to put them in the chat, or if there are other things that you are wondering about, we can talk about that as well.
I have a quick question. So I was wondering, how would you go about getting doing part-time school if the school normally requires full-time? Because isn't that something that you'd have to do before applying or while applying?
Yeah. So if as an accommodation, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, because I think that the school that I want to go to, I don't think they allow people to do part-time.
Right. So a lot of times that is a discussion with the DSO and the functional limitations. If the reason for requesting a part-time schedule or for reduced hour course load, I mean, it's called different things at different colleges. If the reason is medical, then it would fall under accommodations. And so that would be a discussion with the DSO, with the and then looking at the documentation, like for example, like when in my last job of looking at like it becoming an accommodation request around not being able to physically be in person as much time, there's kind of a similar thing because it was medical and because it was part of FSHD functional limitations, then that can be adjusted. And so typically that is an option that is outside of like the policy of typically at colleges, it's a 12-hour full time um, student requirement, but there is flexibility in looking at that. There's also ways of looking at balancing a schedule with requesting more online classes to get up to that 12 hours if you ever did want to try 12 hours. Um, does that address your question?
Yeah, thank you. Also, when would you suggest first contacting the DSO? Would that be like right after you get accepted or like
Or earlier? I mean, it's something
okay.
that I would encourage just as part of like the college search of like really getting in the habit of feeling comfortable to reach out, and that way you can also gauge their responsiveness, and they should absolutely be willing to answer questions if not over email with or in a Zoom or Teams meeting. And
Okay.
so I think that would be great if you just start looking at um, like those sorts of options. But yeah, absolutely, that can be a part of accommodations of looking at reduced course load or modifying the schedule. Like some campuses do have like what's called a J term or something over the winter holiday where you can bump in another class if unless you
Hmm.
need to just take the holiday to completely like get the fatigue levels down and everything. But there are creative ways to fit in extra classes.
Wade, if you wanted
Oh,
priority registration, you would have to contact the DSO prior to it, right?
Correct.
So I
And
think that priority registration would be, ideal. Contact the DSO, get priority registration, then you could pick the classes you want, and then you could talk about your reduced schedule as well.
they're they're together of like because she's referencing like a policy that and often it does impact financially too of being a full-time student. So of the typically the 12 credit hours, but they're linked. You're absolutely right that the two go hand in hand because then like if you do have priority registration, it's going to make it easier to like get the specific classes and to find an easier class that hasn't already filled up because it's easy. And so there's ways to do that. And like at least at the last college I worked at, anyone who is registered with the DSO receiving accommodations automatically had priority registration. I'm not sure how, Sapna, do you know how common that is?
I'm not sure. I think that'll have to be a conversation with your specific institution. But I
Okay.
mean, yeah, that's also, yeah, a good question to ask ahead of time. Is priority registration an option? They give it to athletes, but they
Yeah,
can
yeah,
hopefully
we will save
have
our
other
comments
accommodations.
about that. But fortunately, the last college I worked at, the two groups that automatically had priority registration were athletes and students who are registered with the DSO.
I think
Um,
would you
Sarah,
suggest, oh, sorry.
go ahead. I know Sarah
Would
has
you
her
s-
hand up.
would you suggest registering like is that even possible to do before you get accepted? Like right now I'm working on college applications. Should I like contact them now?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly worth just talking through some of this stuff. I'm also more than happy to meet with your family of talking through it, like some of this in much more detail of like
Okay.
to be able to answer your questions. Like I'm um, available to meet over Zoom and can screen share and really talk through some of this and kind of nail down some of the logistics, so step by step of when to do what, when to do this. Um, would that be helpful, or you can follow up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
And then I did see Sarah and Gabby with their
Yeah.
hand.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you? Thank you for doing this. I was going to ask, one of our challenges with the IEP is having, since Sarah had so many teachers in high schools, having them follow through with some of the accommodations. Do you find a challenge with professors at that level? And what kind of challenges do you find, for them to follow through with some of these accommodations or be willing to respect those accommodations?
It's a very good question. And it does touch on some national issues of there has some with like more and more students having accommodation, there has been some faculty fatigue or faculty pushback with the increase in accommodations, particularly around ADHD and some of the other things. But my experience, and then just talking to professors, is that um, there is some privileged in the sense of like that the visible disabilities, like a lot of professors are much more willing to work with that. And I do think that in general too, professors are pretty good at following through. And that does get at the role of the DSO, is that part of their job is to educate professors and make sure that they are on top of this. That doesn't mean though that everything will be perfect. Kind of like Ali alluded to earlier, with like technically accommodation might be met, but it's not inclusive and it's not treating the student as a valuable part. So, but I think the office hours and communicating with professors early and like meeting them in person if possible, or at least setting up a Zoom meeting is just so important. Like that investment in time is just once, and typically just it's a not just a professor thing, but a human thing. Once there's a connection, personal connection, there's just so much more willing to help out, and something that also can be if there were something to come up during the semester and the professor knew the situation, like most colleges have the option of like taking an incomplete grade and then finishing up over break or right after break. So professors aren't required to do that, but if they know the situation, they get to know you and understand your commitment. um, that can be another benefit.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Um, I'm gonna power through quickly these. I know. Are we out of time, Ali? Or
We're at time. How much more do you have?
uh, let me see. I'm just gonna and again, I have it as a resource. That something. Did you get a chance to put it in the chat, or will it fit in the chat?
The
Uh,
PowerPoint,
yeah.
not yet. I will.
Um, and the last part was really just about self advocacy and communication, but that is, let's see, none of it. I mean, this will be available as a resource, but and that could be a future discussion if folks are interested of just talking about building the self advocacy communication skills throughout high school, developing the ability to manage their own healthcare. But that isn't something we have to do right now. I'm happy to stay later for more questions if there are, or if Ali, if you need to close it down and get going, I totally understand that too.
I just want to be respectful of your time. If there are any questions for anyone, any burning questions, now's the time to ask them. And then also maybe if you, I don't know, if you want to put your contact information in your navigator in the
Yeah.
chat, and then if someone has questions or if they view this later, the recording, they can reach out to you directly if they want to ask you something that's specific.
Yeah, no, there's certainly so do you mind putting that in? Or
And I'll put my email in there as well. They can always reach out to me and then I can reach out to you. But if they
okay, no, I let me pull up I have
then
the
Sorry, I'm having trouble getting it.
oh, I can pull, oh, let me find it.
right.
Um,
there's my email, and they could always ask questions to me. And then the recording will be posted on Facebook, and it'll be posted on the YouTube channel, the FSHD Society YouTube channel. And I'll also put it on the parents group page. And I can send it to your email, Gabby, if
Uh,
you'd like it to. I can send it directly to you once they edit it.
I'm not. Oh, it came out as dark text. Is that readable?
Yeah, navigator at
Yeah.
fshdSociety.org. Okay.
Okay.
No,
But
no other questions?
I'm happy to stick around or meet with folks later.
Okay, there's some additional resources there. Okay, if there's no other questions, Wade and Sepna, thank you so much. This was such good, valuable, and a wealth of information. There's a lot, like you said, to go through and a lot to think about. And everybody's situation is probably a little bit different. So the one-on-one counseling that you're offering is very valuable. And thank you so much. I think this is just a conversation starter, something to think about, and a lot of things that we need to dig in deeper. And obviously starting sooner rather than later. Don't wait till your child has graduated. Probably start looking at this stuff a few years in advance.
Great, great. No, thank you for having us. It was fun to be here.
Yeah,
And I'm
this is
happy.
a lot of really good information. So thank you so much. Again,
Thank
his contact
you.
his contact
Thank
information is in
you.
the chat and mine.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, Wade.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good night.